So far this tournament, I think the conclusion has been, it has been a bit chalky. There hasn't been enough mid-major, low-major excitement, madness, if you will, unpredictability, surprises. There hasn't been. Now, I'm curious, Cade, because if you're trying to diagnose a small sample size, why is this? Why aren't any the low major teams, the mid major teams, not even competing in half the games? They're in it, they're not in it. Hasn't been that much drama in terms of back and forth. Is it because, in some sense, small sample size, that the NIL college basketball landscape lends itself to aiding the 1s and the 2 seeds of the world comparatively to the mid-major champions that are trying to make a run? Because if you're good in a mid-major, even for a year, you don't even have to be the best player in the best team in your conference to be even moderately successful. All of a sudden, you're going to get calls from the Tennessees, from the Alabamas of the world, because Rick Pitino said it earlier in the year. He goes, I'm not going after high school players anymore. I'm going after college players. I'm going after transfers. Those guys are more adequate, more capable of replacing my production comparatively to an 18-year-old. That's the bottom line. That's sort of where college basketball recruiting is heading. Does that hurt the mid-major team in your head? And therefore, does that hurt the tournament outright because a lot of these mid-majors, they're the prey to the predators of the top seeds?
I think we're forgetting that literally 2 years ago, the highest seed we had in a Final Four was a 4 seed. 4 seed, 5 seed, 5 seed, and then the last one I believe was an 8 seed or 9 seed.
It was an
Miami.
8, 9, 4, and a 5. UConn was a 4, Miami was a 5, Florida Atlantic was a
8.
8 or a 9, one of the two.
And
San Diego State was a 5, excuse me.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was just 2 years ago. So, and that was a whole bunch of not necessarily mid-major teams. FAU and San Diego State were right up there.
Yeah.
But
non-power fours.
But that was just 2 years ago. So we are, I think, taking this a little bit as an exaggerate of, hey, we just happen to have some really, really dominant teams this year. And this is something that's just been happening throughout history as well, where it ebbs and flows between the madness of March and the elite doing their best. In 2008, for the first time ever, and since the only time ever, we had all 4 1 seeds make the Final Four. 2 years later, or 3 years later, in 2011, we had the highest total number of seeds make the Final Four with a 3-seeded UConn, a 3-seeded Kentucky, a 4-seeded UConn, a 8-seeded Butler, and an 11-seeded VCU, which was a first 4 team. That was 3 years after all 4 1 seeds made the Final Four. So I'm not going to say, oh, the NIL has ruined the tournament just because we happen to have a year where all of the best are doing really well in their respective roles.
Now, the NIL is new. Last couple of years. Do you think that it aids the high major team comparatively to the low major team more?
Yes. But again, there is opportunity for those mid-majors to have the opportunity for a lot of really good untouched talent.
You gotta be a little savvier. You gotta be a little savvier.
So Will Wade, who I know you have thoughts about for
the McNeese State head coach, former McNeese State head coach. They lost 12 hours ago, but now he's the current NC State head coach.
It was a very interesting interview he had on Unsportsmanlike with Evan Cohen, Chris Canty, and Michelle Smallman, which you can listen to from 6 to 10 a.m. right here on ESPN 106.3. He did an interview with them like 6 hours before he took that NC State job. So it was a very interesting, awkward interview. But he said something that really resonated with me on how mid-majors can work with the best of the best. They are basically not the minor league system, but they feed the mid-major teams through the transfer portal. Come to us, make a run, make a name for yourself, and then we can help you push into a larger team. You look at FAU from a few years ago. Almost all of those the starting 5 from that team are now with
high major teams
that are in the tournament right now.
Alongside the coach. Yeah.
The coach, Vlad Golden, is also with Michigan. Elijah Martin is making a name for himself with Florida right now.
Yep.
John L. Davis is also with Michigan right now too. Those are all guys who made names for themselves with a mid-major team at FAU and then went into the transfer portal, got into big major markets, and are now making their names even more for themselves at the highest stages and could make some great tournament runs. I think that could still be the role of those type of teams, be the farm system into the major D1 programs. And therefore, teams can get together some of the best future talent, a lot of good young stars, and make some runs in the future.
So you're more on the sense of you'd rather them be a little bit more of a minor league team, and that we're going to get you best prepared to take steps forward with other teams.
I think that's a good selling point for those teams. Hey, listen, because think about, I'm trying to think of a good example from around here. Let's take a good high school player in the name of Javian Jones, who right now is playing for the Kings Academy Lions, played football and basketball, made our top 63 list last night at our top 63 basketball event, also made our top 63 football. He is not getting the looks right now from major D1 programs that he was hoping for. But let's just say he takes a smaller offer and then absolutely balls out. That's an easy way to transfer portal, easy way for him to start getting to those bigger markets that he was hoping for out of high school. It might just, your high school period might just need to take a few more years at the lower collegiate level, because all it takes, Colin, is one remarkable season to make a name for yourself.
Now, it's funny you say that, because yesterday at our Top 63 event, I spoke with Coach Jeff Price of Grandview Prep Girls Basketball.
State championship team.
Jeff Price had a 30-year career coaching collegiately, Georgia Southern, was the head coach at Lynn University right down there in Boca, which is a D2 school, high-end D2 school, good basketball. I asked him that specific question. Does the current landscape lend itself to the high majors versus low majors, and what's your perspective on it? He said exactly that. He goes, the mid-major, D2, NAIA, those types of schools, their selling point has to be, we are going to propel you, we will move you ourselves after a year. You are rentals. We are there to prop you up, get you found. It is harder than ever for high school players to get found. He went on to say about how over at Lynn, he's got two guys on UC San Diego who just played against Michigan as a 12-5 game in the first round. He said it's tricky, it's hard, but similar to how a lot of high major coaches didn't want to adjust to the NIL, it's sink or swim. Jay Wright, Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, those guys have the money to just retire and they've had the careers where they could just kind of walk away from the game because they just don't want to deal with it. The D2 coach, the NAIA coach, the low D1 coach can't necessarily do that. They got to keep coaching. So you got to kind of move with the times in terms of, all right, well, this is the landscape. This is how I'm going to adjust to it. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I guess is a whole nother question. But it's harder, therefore. So you're talking about, hey, we'll get you here. We're going to propel you to the next level. That's the goal. That's the goal of what that school is trying to do. We will get players here by telling them, hey, if you play well here, we will get you to a better school. Do you think that doesn't lend itself to the team being any good? That lends itself to the player being very good. There's a little bit of a individualist aspect to that because all of a sudden it's me throughout high school trying to get found. And it's me throughout your first few years of college trying to get found. And then you get to a team that's very good that you're going to be a piece on, and all of a sudden it's we, college sports.
I think that needs to be good coaching then.
Yeah.
At that point, the coach
You understand my point, though, right? It's
I do.
just
No,
like, it's
I
a
hear
little
you.
minor league-esque.
I hear you. The mindset of these players now is looking past their current team, which could hurt the current team that they're actually on. It's almost like an all-star effect where all-star teams don't necessarily play together. Shout out Coach Herb Brooks from Miracle. But the coach needs to be the one to understand that is how he's selling these players. And then when it's actually time to have his 5 guys step onto the court, hey, guys, we need to start playing as a team. You do have to strike lightning in a bottle a little bit to get all 5 of your good guys to play well together. And
you got to do it quickly.
Yes, absolutely. But I've seen it in the past, and I'm not going to not believe that it can happen in the future as well with some of these teams. I'm not going to say that all of these mid-major teams, we're not going to have 3 13-seed teams win next year or something like that. But I'm not going to say that madness can't keep happening in this tournament.
I agree. I'm not ready to say that it's too small of a sample size. I think this, to your point, I'm just trying to exercise the argument. The grand scheme of it is that there are really good, really well-rounded 1-seed teams this year. and it's a lot of teams with experience. It's not just like a bunch of 5 stars. Duke might be a little bit, but a bunch of 5 stars that have just been compiled together, and they're starting to the one and done era, making a big run. College sports is not that anymore. That it has shifted away from that. It is about experience. Half these guys have played at smaller schools. Walter Clayton was at Iona. Rick Pitino found him, and he's now the best player on the University of Florida. You mentioned Elijah Martin, who was at FAU on that FAU run team. He's there now. Danny Wolf was at Yale, who's on Michigan now. They're in the second weekend. There's a bunch of Vlad Golden, who was at FAU. These guys don't start at their current school, the majority of them at least. That's the crazy part. Half these guys are transfers in from smaller schools. That is sort of like an earning your stripes. Chaz Lanier, who's on Tennessee, played a great game last night. Played 2 or 3 years at North Florida, and then now he's at Tennessee as one of the better scorers in the SEC. Dalton Knecht, who's now in the Lakers, played 1 year at Tennessee, pretty good in the tournament. He was at Northern Colorado. John Tonje, the best player on Wisconsin, who was one of the best players in the Big Ten, one of the best players in the country. Northern Colorado for 2 years, went to Missouri, got hurt, was going to use another year of Northern Colorado, was going to go to New Mexico, ended up going to Wisconsin, had a great year. That's the new nature of college basketball. Not similar to football, but basketball, it's more important to play than it is to earn your way up.
One of the reasons that it's different than football is because in football, you have to stay till your junior year before you can move up. Players are getting rotated faster because they're allowed to get drafted earlier in their college career. Cooper Flagg is going to be gone, and Duke could be a whole different team next year.
They will be.
You can't keep these players on your team because they're going into the next level, especially if you're the best of the best type of team. If you're just a normal SEC, ACC type team, you might lose a few players, and then you're grabbing 3 or 4 more in the transfer portal. You're allowed to build those up.
Depth in college football is also a bit celebrated. It's okay. Players are willing to sit and learn because whether they're not big enough yet, they're not strong enough yet, there's a physical adjustment that they need to undergo. There's certain players, there's an 18-year-old probably down the street that could go play at a high major Division I school tomorrow. But it's more about putting together a resume, putting together the experience, and getting coaches confident in your ability to help them win games. It's more important for players to develop experience playing at a lower level than it is waiting to play at a higher level. That is where college sports has went. So weirdly enough, we started this conversation was, does the low major, mid-major team get hurt here because all the high major teams are stealing the FAU players of the world, the North Florida, the Northern Colorado players of the world? But to that same token, I think players are starting to come to grips with the fact that I got to play at a lower level unless I'm an elite of the elite prospect. I have to play at a lower level in order to get to the higher level because that experience will actually help my eventual goal of being capable in the NCAA tournament. Now, that's usually with high major teams, but when you're a team like FAU from 2 years ago, and you have Nick Boyd, who's now at San Diego State, and you have Elijah Martin, who's now is sitting there at Florida. You have John L. Davis, who's at Arkansas. You got Vlad Golden, who's at Michigan. They still made a run together. It was possible then. Didn't get it done. Made a Final Four run. And that was before they got that experience that takes them to their separate respective spots. It's an interesting conversation because I see both sides. A chalky bracket in the NCAA tournament with a lot of transfers, a lot of plug-and-plays from small, mid-major teams that have now taken steps forward in their careers. To the same token, mid-major teams don't get to keep around those players because their job is to go there for 1 or 2 years, get good, and then move on. It's an endless cycle that I think college basketball at least, has started to lean itself into. It used to be the one-and-done era. Now we're in the era of transfers. Now we're in the era of experience. UConn, the last 2 years. Cam Spencer was their starting 2-guard. He was a transfer from Rutgers, was at Loyola, Maryland before that. Tristan Newton was the transfer from East Carolina. Hassan Diarra was a transfer from Texas A&M. They had transfers all over the court. Not a lot of homegrown. But you sink or you swim. You got to learn how to, as Jeff Price of Grandview Prep Girls Basketball said to me yesterday at Top 63, he said, this is the state, you can't walk away. You got to learn how to figure this out. You got to learn how to navigate. There's now a map. Use it or lose it.